The only thing that makes sense for what's going on in this country is that demons are influencing people, allowing their bodies to be possessed to run satanic agendas that are out here running. So if nobody's going to say it, I sure will.
If somebody were to come in, as crazy as it might be, and say and deny the Holocaust ever happened or deny it happened the way it did, the way it was reported, I think if I were a professor, I would expect a professor to not shout that person down and throw them out of the classroom, certainly, or embarrass them in front of their other students.
You just described a legitimate debate in classrooms facilitated by a professor on the Holocaust. That's a huge step back for our higher education institutions.
On September 1st, 2011, faceless, cowardly bastards commandeered our planes, drove them into our buildings, killing our moms, our dads, our brothers, our sisters, our aunts, our uncles, our sons, our daughters. What did the aviation industry and the federal government do? They allowed pilots to carry guns.
The tragic situation that made worldwide news with the 10-year-old in Ohio, first and foremost, is about the fact, just like you, that little girl was not protected by her mother, and she allowed a paramour for paying the rent to abuse her child so her rent was paid, and that is the truth behind this story.
So let us not continue to spread disinformation time and time again about certain families' personal issues that they have dealt with in terms of a 10-year-old rape victim being raped and child sexual abuse. I take extreme offense to that on behalf of the family and the poor 10-year-old who is subjected in that way to being raped at such a young, tender age.
People that are possessed by demons don't get to make demonic agendas and demonic doctrines that affect our people and our children and our laws and our country. The root issue is identity, and our battle's not among flesh and blood, but powers and principalities and powers in high places. Everybody's after identity right now. And when they can confuse your identity, they can destroy this country, and we the people who have imbued our power into the representatives can run another agenda that's frankly demonic. And if you can't say Jesus Christ has come in the flesh, your body is possessed most likely by demons, or you haven't invited him in.
Did you just call our Hindu, Muslim, and Jewish members demons? I heard you say if they did not have Jesus Christ in their heart.
If you don't have the Holy Spirit inside you, there's a phrase you can't say, Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. And if you are open to those other gods based on that faith, you're allowing other gods, non-Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh gods, to possess your physical form.
Follow up. So
that would be described as being giving access to your physical form. You're the mystery, hidden from angels for generations, the hope of Christ, hope of God, Christ in you. So if you're not down with that, so to speak, if you're of another religion that's not of that, you've given access to non-godly entities to make your decisions.
Representative Liston, could you bring this back to HB 68, please?
Well,
so
I'm concerned that he's calling our members demons and saying that that's why we support this, or we are against this bill.
No, we're all hopefully human entities, but like what you allow to rule your spirit, your soul, and a body.
You answered in this interview, you said professors should be discussing the pros and cons of both sides. In this case, both of these economic theories you were talking about, and historically look at which one has worked better or worse. So I'm wondering how that would apply to slavery or the Holocaust. Would you, if a student had a dissenting view about the Holocaust, right, which there's a very active denial group out there, would the professor be obliged to agree with the student, and could the professor take a side on the Holocaust?
Through the chair, Representative Weinstein, great question. I've had that question from a number of individuals. And, you know, I don't remember which place I was quoted in the media for that. But look, it's all about, and I referenced in my testimony this morning, the Chicago principles. Okay, and if you go back and look at those are extremely good, and they've been adopted by a number of institutions of high reputation around the country. And the Holocaust has come up in a number of questions that I've had with individuals. Of course, look, I think Holocaust deniers are, you know, off the charts. Okay, I mean, I visited in my travels 3 or 4 prison camps, former prison camps, and those are experiences you just never forget, certainly. And there is no question that history is on the side of, I should say, against the Holocaust deniers. I would expect that the professor would come down on the side of what is history, what is the preponderance of evidence suggest about the Holocaust and everything that was surrounding it in World War II. And the idea should be that the preponderance of historical evidence should win the day. May not convince that individual student to change their mind, possibly, but it should be in a classroom setting of diversity of thought. Nobody should be shouted down, as ridiculous as their views might be and as wrong as they might be. That's not what our universities are about. Our universities should be about, accepting even views that are uncomfortable. The Chicago principles talk about the value of making students feel a little bit uncomfortable in the sense of, exposing them to opposing opinions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm glad you visited some camps, but we're not talking about your personal experience. We're talking about the standard that you're planning on setting in our classrooms, which is, again, based on the Chicago principles, that professors are obliged to discuss pros and cons of both sides.
Well,
do you think that is I'm glad that you believe the Holocaust happened, but if there's a professor who doesn't, right, I think it's an incredibly slippery slope that you're setting for our universities, and I think it's incredibly dangerous. And I think it's a shame that you couldn't unequivocally say here that, no, we should not have Holocaust denial being allowed as a part of a legitimate debate in a classroom, which is what you just described.
So under this bill, if a 13-year-old girl, let's say, was raped by a serial rapist, broke into her house, or maybe more likely, raped by a family member, which occurs frequently, unfortunately, this bill would require this 13-year-old to carry this felon's fetus to term, regardless of any emotional or psychological damage or trauma that may be inflicted upon this 13-year-old girl to deliver this felon's fetus. Is that right?
Rape is a difficult issue, and it emotionally scars the individual, all or in part, for the rest of their life, just as child abuse does. But if a baby is created, it is a human life, and whether that mother ends that pregnancy or not, the scars will not go away. It is a shame that it happens, but there's an opportunity for that woman, no matter how young or old she is, to make a determination about what she's going to do to help that life be a productive human being.
You earlier said every life is important. The life of the 13-year-old girl in my hypothetical is important. Can you imagine a 13-year-old girl going to school? Because she's going to go to school while she's pregnant, and she becomes increasingly pregnant, and she shows. And 13-year-old kids are mean, they're evil, and they're going to say all kinds of bad things to their classmate about her condition. You don't think that's going to scar that girl? I think this girl has rights every bit as much as this zygote has rights under your bill. This girl has rights, and I don't believe we can lose sight of the rights of the person who was raped.
Both in 2021 and in 2022, there were over 40,000 abortions, enough to fill Great American Ballpark, where I love to go watch our Cincinnati Reds. Do you all know that LeBron James, an Ohio child, was born to a teen mother who chose life after she had been pressured greatly to abort her son? His annual salary this year is $44 million. How many wonderful, beautiful children have we lost?
Would you agree, or would your organization agree, that there should be no exceptions whatsoever with regard to abortions?
Yes, we would. Absolutely. That's because life begins at conception.
Do you also agree that there should be no exceptions related to the life of the mother?
Through the chair to the representative, yes, I agree with that. If the mother's life is in danger, that's also an exaggerated health care statement. If she's far enough along in the pregnancy, an abortion is not necessary. The child can be delivered. And we know from many times me testifying at the State House, we've had obstetricians testify here that abortion is never necessary for the life of the mother.
Along that same line of questioning, do you believe a woman suffering from sepsis while she goes through a miscarriage should be denied medical abortion care?
An intentional killing of a preborn child, 90-something% of abortions in Ohio are just that. They're for convenience. They're not for health care. Miscarriage care has nothing to do with intentional abortion, and I know that for a fact because I have lost 3 children by miscarriage. And that was not an intentional abortion where I chose not to have my child for convenience. They're completely unrelated issues.
I'm sorry to hear about your past experiences with miscarriage. Deeply, I am. But as my colleague just pointed out, there are no exceptions in the heartbeat bill that was passed here in Ohio. Therefore, that statement that you just made on a rare occasion that this happened is absolutely false. It is not rare. And in the instance of the life of the mother being in jeopardy, the loss of losing that life, we have no exceptions to save the life of that person here in Ohio. So I don't agree with you that it's rare. It happens all the time. In fact, there was a current situation in Ohio with a couple where that did happen, where the organs of that, what's the word I'm looking for?
Baby.
Fetus,
Baby.
were growing outside of the womb, and she had to go across lines, state lines, to get the medical care that she needed. So I don't agree with you that it's rare, but I do feel for you and send you my most heartfelt words to go to what you have been through, right? Because that is essentially what we are fighting for here. We are fighting for all life, including the life of a mother. So I also want to point out that it is also not rare just in our country. It happened in Ireland. So this is happening everywhere, including here in Ohio, and I do not want to stand here and allow this type of big government overreach in our medical care for reproductive freedom. It's outrageous.